At a family dinner, my daughter-in-law leaned in close, her perfume sharp and unfamiliar, and whispered, "I'm pregnant with your sons." I didn't react. I didn't drop my fork. I didn't look at her. I didn't even breathe for a second. I just sat there, my hand resting lightly on the edge of my plate, as if nothing had happened. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of my story, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this moment, this quiet, devastating moment, can travel. Because what happened that night, it didn't break me. It revealed everything." The dining room looked exactly the way I had imagined it would. Warm light from the chandelier spilled softly across the polished oak table. The good china, white with a thin gold rim, was set carefully at each place. I had taken it out myself, one piece at a time, wiping each plate with a soft cloth, the way my husband used to do before holidays. There were 6 settings. Mine, my son Daniel's, my daughter-in-law Claire's, and 3 more, for guests who hadn't arrived yet. I had roasted a chicken the way Daniel liked it when he was a boy. Lemon, rosemary, a little too much garlic. The scent filled the house hours before they arrived, settling into the walls like a memory trying to stay alive. Mashed potatoes, buttered green beans, fresh bread I picked up that morning from the bakery on Maple Street. I wanted everything to be perfect, because it had been a long time since we had all sat down together. A very long time. When Daniel and Claire walked in, I noticed something immediately. Not what they said, not what they wore, but how they moved. Together, but not quite together. Claire walked slightly ahead of him, her heels clicking confidently against the hardwood floor, her posture straight, her smile already in place. Daniel followed a step behind, carrying a bottle of wine he held too tightly, like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. "Mom," he said, leaning in for a quick hug. "Quick. Too quick." Claire kissed the air beside my cheek. "Everything smells amazing," she said, her voice sweet, practiced. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble. But I always did. That's what mothers do. Even when no one asks. Even when no one notices." Dinner began quietly. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, but careful. Forks against plates. The soft clink of glasses. The hum of the refrigerator in the background. Every sound felt louder than it should have been, as if the silence between us was stretching too thin. I tried to fill it. "So," I said gently, folding my napkin on my lap, "how's work going, Daniel?" "Busy," he replied, without looking up. "You know, same as always." Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He's doing really well," she added. "They're talking about expanding his role." "That's wonderful," I said. And I meant it. I have always been proud of my son, even when he stopped calling as often, even when holidays became too complicated, even when I started feeling like a guest in my own family. Halfway through the meal, Claire reached for her glass of water, then set it down again without drinking. That was the first sign. Small. Almost nothing. But I noticed. I always noticed the small things. She glanced at Daniel. He didn't look back. Instead, he focused on cutting his chicken into precise, even pieces, as if the task required his full attention. Claire leaned back slightly in her chair, then forward again. And then, without warning, she turned toward me. Slowly, deliberately, she leaned in, just enough that no one else at the table could hear her voice clearly. Close enough that I could smell her perfume. Sharp. Expensive. Not the kind she used to wear. And that's when she said it. "I'm pregnant. With your sons." Her voice was soft. Almost gentle. But there was something underneath it. Something cold. Something intentional. I kept my eyes on my plate. The mashed potatoes had gone untouched. The butter was melting into them, slowly disappearing, like something being erased. I picked up my fork. Took a small bite. Chewed. Swallowed. "I see," I said quietly. That was all. No questions. No congratulations. No reaction. Across the table, Daniel finally looked up. Not at me. At her. A flicker of something crossed his face. Nervousness. Guilt. Or maybe fear. It was gone before I could name it. The rest of the dinner continued as if nothing had happened. We talked about the weather. About traffic. About a neighbor who had moved away. Ordinary things. Safe things. But underneath it all, something had shifted. The room felt different. Colder. Like a window had been opened somewhere, letting in air that didn't belong. Claire smiled more than usual. Daniel spoke less. And I watched. I listened. I remembered. Because that whisper, it wasn't just news. It was a message. And I had learned, over the years, to pay attention to messages that weren't meant to be heard out loud. When dinner finally ended, Claire stood up first. "Thank you for having us," she said brightly. "Everything was perfect." "Perfect." I nodded. "I'm glad you came." Daniel lingered a moment longer. "Mom," he started, then stopped. His eyes met mine. For a brief second, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who would run into the kitchen asking what was for dinner. The one who used to tell me everything. But that boy, he was gone. "I'll call you," he said. I smiled. "Of course you will." After they left, the house fell silent again. The kind of silence that settles deep into your bones. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the table. 6 plates. Only 3 used. The others still untouched. Waiting. Like they had expected something that never arrived. I began clearing slowly. 1 plate at a time. 1 glass. 1 fork. Each movement deliberate. Measured. Calm. Because that's who I am. I don't react. I don't explode. I don't fall apart in front of people who are waiting to see me break. I placed the last plate in the sink, turned off the light, and stood there in the dark for a moment, listening, thinking, replaying her words. "I'm pregnant with your son's." No, that wasn't the part that mattered. Not really. It was the way she said it, the way she leaned in, the way she made sure I was the only one who heard. That wasn't an announcement. That was a warning. And as I stood there, in the quiet of my own home, I realized something. I had been so focused on holding this family together. I hadn't noticed what they were building behind my back. But now I would. I wouldn't ask. I wouldn't confront. I wouldn't make a scene. Not yet. Because some truths, they don't reveal themselves when you chase them. They reveal themselves when you step back and let people think you already believe their story. So I smiled. Not for them. Not for anyone else. Just for myself. Because whatever game they thought they were playing, they had no idea. The house felt different after they left. Not emptier. Just quieter in a way that wasn't natural. I didn't turn the lights back on right away. The kitchen stayed dim, lit only by the faint glow from the street lamp outside, slipping through the blinds in thin, pale lines across the floor. I stood there for a moment longer than I needed to, listening to nothing. That's how silence works when something has changed. It doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It feels like something is missing or hiding. I finished cleaning the table the same way I always did. Plate by plate, glass by glass. No rush, no noise. The rhythm of it used to comfort me. Tonight, it felt different. I picked up Daniel's plate last. He hadn't finished his food. That alone told me more than anything he said all evening. When he was a boy, he never left the table without clearing his plate. Even when he didn't like what I cooked, he'd eat it anyway. Said it was respect. That was his father's word. Respect. Funny how some words disappear over time. I scraped the leftovers into the trash. The sound was louder than it should have been. I paused, looked down. The mashed potatoes had hardened slightly at the edges. The gravy had separated. The green beans were still bright, untouched. Everything looked abandoned. I rinsed the plate slowly, watching the water run over it, carrying away what was left of the evening. Just like that. Gone. Upstairs, the bedroom door creaked the same way it always had. Some sounds never change. I didn't turn on the overhead light. Just the small lamp by the bed. Soft. Yellow. Familiar. His side of the bed was still made. Perfectly. I never slept there anymore. I don't know when that started. Maybe after he passed. Maybe before. It's hard to tell. Sometimes, when absence becomes normal. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My hands rested in my lap. Still. Calm. But my mind replayed it again. Her voice. That whisper. "I'm pregnant with your son's." No hesitation. No emotion. Just precise. Like she had practiced it. I leaned back slightly, staring at the wall across from me. There's a photograph there. Daniel at 8 years old, holding a fishing rod that was too big for him, smiling like the world was simple, like everything made sense. His father stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder. Proud. Quietly proud. That's the kind of man he was. He didn't say much. But when he did, you listened. You watch people, he used to tell me. Not what they say, what they do. I didn't understand it fully back then. I do now. Claire didn't look at me after she said it. That was the first thing. She leaned back into her chair like nothing had happened. Picked up her glass. Smiled. Spoke about something trivial. I don't even remember what. That's not how someone shares news like that. Not with family. Not with warmth. Not with joy. And Daniel, he didn't react either. Not immediately. No surprise. No confusion. Just that brief flicker in his eyes. Then silence. That told me more than anything else. I stood up slowly, walked over to the dresser, opened the top drawer. Inside, everything was exactly where I left it. Old letters, a few photographs, documents neatly stacked, and one small notebook. I hadn't opened it in years. Not since things started to feel different between us and them. I took it out, held it for a moment, then placed it on the dresser. Not yet. Back downstairs, the clock on the wall ticked steadily. 9:42 p.m. I poured myself a glass of water. Didn't drink it, just held it in my hand. Cool, steady, real. Unlike everything else that night. There are moments in life when you realize something important. Not because someone tells you, but because everything stops making sense in the same way it used to. And in that space, truth begins to take shape. Quietly, slowly, but clearly. This wasn't about a pregnancy. I knew that. Not yet. Not fully, but enough. It was about timing, delivery, intention. She chose that moment, that setting, that distance, close enough to whisper, far enough that no one else could hear. That's not sharing. That's planting something. I set the glass down on the counter, untouched, just like dinner. I walked to the window, pulled the curtain back slightly. The street outside was empty. Still, a car passed in the distance. Headlights cutting through the dark for a brief second, then gone. Everything returns to quiet eventually, but not the same quiet. I thought about calling him, just to ask, just to hear his voice. But I didn't, because I already knew what I would hear. Careful words, short answers, a version of the truth, not the truth itself. Instead, I turned away from the window, back into the house. My house, the one I had built a life in, the one I had filled with meals, conversations, laughter, and lately, silence. I turned off the kitchen light, then the hallway, one by one, until only the bedroom lamp remained. Before I went upstairs, I paused, just for a second, and said it out loud. Not loudly, not emotionally, just clearly. I heard you, not just the words, but what was behind them, and whatever it was she thought she had started that night. She had no idea. I was already paying attention. We're playing against. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had somewhere to be, but because my mind had already started working long before my eyes opened. The house was still. That same heavy stillness from the night before. It hadn't left. It had settled in. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening. The heater clicked on, then off. A car passed outside. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then silence again. Ordinary sounds, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. I got up slowly, made the bed, smoothed the sheets on my side only. His side stayed untouched. Perfect. Like always. In the kitchen, I followed the same routine. Coffee, 2 slices of toast, butter, spread evenly. I didn't rush. I never rush. Routine is a kind of control. And right now, I needed that. I sat at the table, the same table from last night. But in the morning light, it looked different. Cleaner, simpler, almost innocent. You wouldn't know what had been said there just hours before. That's the thing about words. They disappear. But what they mean, that stays. I took a sip of coffee. Still hot. Still bitter. I didn't add sugar. My phone sat on the table beside me. Face down. I hadn't checked it yet. Didn't need to. If Daniel had called, I would have heard it. If Claire had texted, she wouldn't. Not after last night. I flipped the phone over. No missed calls. No messages. Just the time. 7:18 a.m. I nodded slightly, as if that confirmed something. Because it did. If what she said had been real, shared the way normal people share news, there would have been something. A message. A follow-up. A correction. But there was nothing. Just silence. Again, I stood up, carried my plate to the sink, washed it immediately. I don't leave things sitting. Not dishes. Not questions. After that, I went to the living room. Sat down in the same chair I always use. The one by the window. Good light there. Clear view of the street. I like to see things coming. I picked up the small notebook from last night. The one I hadn't opened. Not yet. I ran my fingers along the edge. Worn. Familiar. Then I opened it. The first page was blank. The second 2. I flipped further in. Names. Dates. Small notes. Nothing dramatic. Just observations. Little things I had written down over the years. Times Daniel canceled last minute. Holidays shortened. Visits postponed. Words that didn't quite match actions. I don't know exactly when I started writing things down. It wasn't planned. It just happened. When something feels off long enough, you stop ignoring it. You start keeping track. I found an entry from about a year ago. Claire handled the bank paperwork. Daniel didn't ask me. I paused. Read it again. Then turned the page. Another one. Dinner canceled. Claire said Daniel was too tired. He sounded fine. Then another. Christmas, invited late. Already had plans made. Individually, they didn't mean much. Small things. Easy to explain. Easy to dismiss. But together, they formed something else. A pattern. I closed the notebook slowly, set it down on the table beside me, and leaned back in the chair. Last night wasn't the beginning. That's what I understood now. It was just the first time she said something. Directly. Everything else before that. It had been quieter. More careful. Claire had always been polite. That's the word people would use. Polite. Smiling. Helpful. But always positioned. Always just slightly ahead. Like she was leading something no one else noticed. And Daniel. He followed. Not completely. Not blindly. But enough. I stood up. Walked to the hallway closet. Reached up to the top shelf. There's a small box there. Plain. Nothing special. I brought it down. Opened it on the dining table. Inside were documents. Old ones. House records. Insurance. And a few copies of things Daniel had asked me to sign over the years. Just standard updates, Mom. That's how things are done now. Claire talked to someone about it. I never questioned it. Not really. He was my son. And she was family. I flipped through the papers slowly. Page by page. Careful. Looking, not just reading. There was a change in tone. About a year and a half ago, the wording became more formal. Less personal. More structured. I paused on one document. My name. His name. And hers. All three. I didn't react. Didn't jump to conclusions. That's not how I work. I just closed the folder. Placed it neatly back into the box. And sat there for a moment. Last night, she didn't say much. Just a sentence. Half a sentence, really. But it was enough. Because it told me one thing very clearly. She wanted me to know something. Not everything. Just enough. I stood up again. Walked back to the kitchen. Poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. Watched it disappear. Then I said it quietly. To the empty room. I won't ask. Because asking gives people time. Time to prepare. Time to adjust their story. Time to decide what version of the truth you're allowed to hear. And I wasn't interested in that. I dried my hands. Folded the towel neatly. Placed it back where it belonged. Then I looked around the house. At everything I had built. Everything I had kept together. For years. And for the first time, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel hurt. I felt clear. Whatever she started at that dinner table, it wasn't over. Not even close. And this time, I wasn't going to sit there and wonder what it meant. I was going to find out. That afternoon, I didn't leave the house. I didn't call anyone. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't distract myself. I stayed with it. Because when something doesn't make sense, the worst thing you can do is rush past it. You sit with it. And you let the pieces come back. I made myself another cup of coffee around noon. Didn't finish it. It sat on the table, slowly cooling, just like the one from the morning. I noticed that. I noticed patterns now. I walked through the house without really thinking about where I was going. From the kitchen, to the hallway, into the living room, and back again. Each room held something. Not just furniture. Memory. In the living room, I paused in front of the bookshelf. Second shelf from the top. There's a framed photo there. Daniel, the day he graduated college. Cap slightly crooked. Smile too wide. Claire standing next to him. Her hand already resting lightly on his arm. Not holding. Not gripping. Just placed. Like she belonged there. Even then, I picked up the frame. Looked at it longer than I had in years. At the time, I remember thinking how lucky he was. She was polished. Put together. Confident in ways he wasn't. I thought she would steady him. Help him. I set the frame back exactly where it had been. Same angle. Same position. I don't like things out of place. Back in the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator. Not because I was hungry. Just habit. Inside, everything was organized. Containers stacked neatly. Labels facing forward. That was Claire's system. She introduced it years ago. Said it made things more efficient. At the time, I appreciated it. It felt like help. Now, it felt like control. I closed the fridge slowly. Stood there for a second. Then I remembered something. Small, but clear. It was about 8 months ago. A Sunday. Daniel had come by alone. That didn't happen often. Claire was busy. That's what he said. We sat at this same table. Drinking coffee. Talking about nothing important. Weather. Work. Traffic. The usual. Then he mentioned something. Casually. Like it didn't matter. Claire's been handling most of the financial stuff lately, he said. She's just better at that kind of thing. I nodded. Didn't question it. Why would I? But then he added something else. After a pause. She's been organizing things for the future. I remember that. Because of the way he said it. Not confidently. Not clearly. Just repeating something he'd been told. For the future, I had asked. He shrugged. Yeah. You know, planning ahead. At the time, I let it go. Filed it away. Like everything else. Now, sitting there in the quiet, it didn't feel like nothing anymore. I went back to the dining table. Pulled the small box toward me again. Opened it. This time, I didn't just look. I focused. I found the document from earlier. The one with all 3 names. Mine. Daniel's. Claire's. I read it carefully. Line by line. No assumptions. No emotion. Just facts. The language was subtle. It always is. Not transfer. Not ownership. Words like authorization, access, joint oversight, careful words. Words that don't raise alarm, but change things quietly. I turned the page. There was a date. 18 months ago. I leaned back in my chair. Thought about that timeline. 18 months. That's when things started shifting. Not suddenly. Gradually. Visits became shorter. Calls became less frequent. Decisions were already made before I heard about them. And Claire, she became more involved. In everything. I closed the document. Set it aside. Then I reached for the notebook again. Opened it to a blank page. I picked up a pen. Held it for a second. Then wrote. Dinner. Whisper. Intentional. I paused. Then added another line. No reaction from Daniel. That mattered. More than anything else. I put the pen down. Closed the notebook. Because this wasn't about guessing anymore. It was about confirming. I stood up. Walked to the window again. Same view. Same street. Nothing had changed out there. But inside, everything had shifted. I thought about her words again. Not what she said, but why she said it like that. If it had been simple news, she would have said it out loud. At the table. With a smile. With expectation. But she didn't. She chose quiet. Close. Private. That means it wasn't meant to be shared. It was meant to be delivered. To me. Specifically. Which means, it was meant to move something. I let that settle. Didn't rush to define it. Because when someone plants something like that, they expect a reaction. Confusion. Emotion. Confrontation. And when they don't get it, they adjust. That's when you learn more. I stepped away from the window. Turned back into the house. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't feel lost. I felt steady. Because now I understood one thing clearly. This wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was structured. Slow. Planned. And last night, that whisper, that wasn't the beginning. It was a signal. And whatever comes after a signal is never accidental. That evening, the phone rang. Not loud. Not urgent. Just a normal ring, steady, expected. But in a quiet house, even something normal can feel deliberate. I didn't rush to pick it up. I let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. Then I walked over and answered. Hello. A pause. Then Daniel's voice. Hey, Mom. I leaned slightly against the counter. Hi, Daniel. He didn't say anything right away. I could hear movement on his end. A door closing. Maybe a step outside. That told me something. He didn't want her hearing this. How are you? He asked. Careful. Measured. I'm fine, I said. And I was. Another pause. Then, about last night, he stopped there. Didn't finish the sentence. I waited. I didn't help him. I didn't fill the silence. Claire might have said something that sounded a little off, he continued. Not direct. Not clear. Just enough to test the ground. I heard her, I said. Simple. Neutral. Silence again. Longer this time. She gets nervous sometimes, he added quickly. You know how she is. No, I don't. Not really. I see, I said. That's the thing about truth. When people don't want to say it, they circle around it. They soften it. They reshape it until it sounds easier to accept. She didn't mean anything by it, he went on. It was just bad timing. Bad timing. I let that sit for a moment. Daniel, I said gently. What exactly was she trying to say? There it was. A direct question. Not emotional. Not confrontational. Just clear. On the other end, I heard him exhale. Quiet. Tight. It's nothing, Mom, he said. Really? We'll talk about it later. Later. Another word people use when they don't want to deal with something now. All right, I said. And I meant it. Because I wasn't going to chase him. Not anymore. Everything okay otherwise? He asked. Yes, I replied. Everything's exactly as it should be. That seemed to settle him. Or maybe it relieved him. Okay, he said. I just wanted to check in. Of course he did. We said goodbye shortly after. No tension. No raised voices. Nothing anyone could point to and say, that's where things went wrong. But I stood there for a moment after the call ended. Phone still in my hand. Thinking. He didn't deny it. That's what mattered. He didn't say, she's not pregnant. He didn't say, that's not true. He said, it's nothing. And those two things are not the same. I set the phone down carefully. Walked back to the dining table. Sat in the same chair as the night before. I could still see it. The way she leaned in. The way he didn't react. The way everything continued like it hadn't happened. Now I had something else. His response. Or rather, his lack of one. That confirmed the pattern. I opened the notebook again. Turned to the page I had written earlier. Under no reaction from Daniel, I added, call. Avoided truth. I closed the notebook. Because this wasn't about collecting proof for someone else. It was about understanding the structure. People don't lie in big, obvious ways. Not usually. They do it in pieces. Small omissions. Careful wording. Delayed explanations. And when you put those pieces together, you don't just see what they're hiding. You see how they're hiding it. I stood up. Walked into the hallway. Stopped in front of the mirror. For a moment, I just looked at myself. Not searching. Not judging. Just seeing. 71 years. Lines where time had settled. Eyes that had seen more than they used to. But still clear. Still steady. I didn't look like someone who had just been shaken. I looked like someone who had started paying attention. That's the difference. Back in the kitchen, I poured myself another glass of water. This time, I drank it. Slowly. There's a point in every situation like this where you can choose what role you're going to play. The one who asks. The one who reacts. The one who gets pulled into whatever story is being created. Or the one who watches. I chose to watch. Because Claire didn't whisper that to start a conversation. She whispered it to start a reaction. And when she didn't get one, she sent Daniel. Not to explain, but to soften. To redirect. To make sure things stayed manageable. That's how this works. Step by step. Controlled. I walked over to the small box again. Didn't open it this time. Just rested my hand on top of it. 18 months of quiet changes. One whisper. One careful phone call. This wasn't confusion anymore. It was movement. And I could feel it now. Clear. Steady. Heading somewhere. I turned off the kitchen light. Left the room in shadow. Because whatever they thought they were building, they weren't the only ones keeping track anymore. The next 2 days passed quietly. Too quietly. No calls. No messages. Nothing from Daniel. Nothing from Claire. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. Because silence, when it follows something important, it's never empty. It's active. I kept my routine. Morning coffee. Toast. The same chair by the window. But now, everything had a second layer. I wasn't just living in my home anymore. I was observing it. On the third morning, something changed. Small, but clear. There was an envelope in my mailbox. Plain. White. No return address. I stood there for a moment before picking it up. Not because I was afraid, but because I've learned, when something arrives without explanation, it usually brings one. I brought it inside. Set it on the kitchen table. Didn't open it right away. Instead, I made my coffee first. Sat down. Let the routine settle me. Then I reached for the envelope. Turned it over. Still nothing. I opened it carefully. One clean tear across the top. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Printed. Not handwritten. I pulled it out. Flattened it on the table. And read. It was a medical document. Basic format. Clinic name at the top. Date from just a few days ago. My eyes moved slowly across the page. Patient name. Claire. Then lower. Test results. I didn't react. Not outwardly. Because what I saw didn't match what she said. The dates didn't line up. The details were off. Subtle, but clear. I read it again. Slower this time. If she were pregnant, based on this, the timeline would be different. Different from what she implied that night. I set the paper down. Carefully. This wasn't proof. Not yet. But it was something. Something she didn't expect me to have. Which meant one thing. Someone else was paying attention too. I looked at the envelope again. No name. No note. No explanation. Just information. I didn't ask who sent it. Because right now, that didn't matter. What mattered was this. The whisper. And this document. Didn't align. I leaned back in my chair. Hands resting calmly on the table. This wasn't about emotion anymore. Not confusion. Not even betrayal. This was structure. Claire said something very specific. At a very specific time. In a very specific way. And now, there was a contradiction. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the street. Still quiet. Still normal. But I wasn't looking for something obvious. I was thinking, if she wanted me to believe something, why? And if it wasn't true, then what was the purpose? Control? Pressure? Distraction? Or something else entirely? I turned away from the window, went back to the table, picked up the paper again, read one line, then another. The clinic name stood out. I recognized it. Not from Claire. From somewhere else. I walked over to the drawer, opened it, pulled out an old folder, flipped through it, stopped. There it was. Same clinic. Different document. From over a year ago. I placed the two side by side. Looked at them. Same formatting. Same layout. But different context. Different timing. I didn't need to draw conclusions yet. Just connections. I returned both papers to the table. Aligned them neatly. Because this was no longer just about what she said. It was about what she was building. And now, for the first time, I could see a gap. A mistake. I reached for the notebook again. Opened to a fresh page. And wrote, document received. Timeline inconsistent. Then, below that, someone else is watching. I closed the notebook. Because this changed something. Before, I was alone in this. Now, I wasn't. Whoever sent that envelope, they didn't speak. They didn't explain. They just gave me a piece. And trusted that I would understand it. They were right. I gathered the papers. Placed them back into the folder. Closed it. Then I stood still for a moment. This wasn't over. Not even close. Claire had made a move. But now, there was interference. And in situations like this, that changes everything. Because when more than one person knows the truth, control starts to slip. The envelope changed the rhythm of everything. Not loudly, not all at once, but quietly, in the way truth does when it begins to surface. That afternoon, I didn't sit in the living room. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't follow my usual path from room to room. I stayed at the dining table. The same place where she leaned in. The same place where nothing happened. And everything started. The folder sat in front of me. Closed. Not hidden. Just waiting. I didn't open it again right away. Because once you see something clearly, you don't need to keep staring at it. Instead, I focused on something else. Timing. Claire chose that night. That moment. That distance. And now, just 2 days later, this document appears. That's not coincidence. I stood up. Walked to the calendar on the wall. A simple one. Paper. I still like to see my days physically. I traced back with my finger. Dinner. 2 nights ago. Then further. Appointments. Visits. Small notes I had written for myself. I stopped at a date. 3 weeks ago. Claire, doctor, Daniel mentioned. I remember that. He said it casually. Just like everything else. She had an appointment, he said. Didn't say why. Didn't explain. And I didn't ask. I stepped back from the calendar. Looked at the space between that day. And now, 3 weeks. I walked back to the table. Opened the folder again. Carefully. The date on the document. Recent. Very recent. Which means, whatever she said at dinner was based on something current. Not something from weeks ago. I didn't rush the thought. I let it settle. Because when details don't align, you don't force them. You let them separate. That's how you see what doesn't belong. I picked up the paper. Again. This time, I focused on the clinic name. Then I reached for my phone. Not to call. Not to ask. To check. I searched the clinic. Simple. Quiet. The information came up quickly. Location. Services. Hours. I read through it slowly. Not skimming. Not jumping ahead. Then I saw it. They specialized in more than one thing. Not just routine care. They handled verification, documentation, second opinions. I lowered the phone. Set it down. That mattered. Because now the document wasn't just a result. It was part of a process. A process someone had gone through. And that raised another question. Who initiated it? Claire? Or someone else? I sat back in my chair. Hands folded. Still. Because now there were 2 possibilities. Either she believed what she said, or she wanted me to believe it. And those are not the same thing. I looked at the empty chair across from me. The one she had been sitting in. I could still see her posture. Relaxed. Controlled. People who lie badly, they show it. In their voice. In their hands. In their eyes. Claire didn't. Which means, if this was a lie, it wasn't careless. It was prepared. I stood up again. Walked slowly around the table. Stopped at her chair. Placed my hand lightly on the back of it. Cold. Still. Then I said it quietly. Not to anyone. Just to the space she had occupied. You wanted me to hear that. Not the table. Not the room. Not the family. Me. I stepped back. Because now I understood something else. That whisper wasn't just information. It was targeted. Which means it was meant to influence something. I walked back to the notebook. Opened it. Turned to a new page. And wrote. Statement was intentional. Directed. Then underneath. Purpose still unclear. I paused. Then added one more line. Waiting for next move. I closed the notebook. Because that's what this was now. A sequence. Not random. Not emotional. Strategic. I didn't know her full plan yet. But I didn't need to. Because plans reveal themselves over time. Especially when the person executing them believes they're in control. I turned off the overhead light. Left only the soft lamp near the wall. The room dimmed. Shadows stretching longer across the table. And, for the first time since that dinner, I wasn't just reacting. I was positioned. Waiting. Because whatever she thought she had started with that whisper, she was going to continue it. And next time, I would be ready. The next move came sooner than I expected. It was late afternoon. The light in the house had shifted, that soft, golden hour where everything looks warmer than it really is. I was in the kitchen, not cooking, just standing there. The phone buzzed. Not a call. A message. I didn't rush. I wiped my hands on the towel first, then picked it up. It was from Claire. Hi, can we come by tonight? I think we should talk. I read it once. Then again. Simple. Polite. Neutral. But not casual. There's a difference. People don't ask to talk unless something needs to be managed. I didn't reply right away. I set the phone down. Let the message sit there. Because timing matters. Not just what you say, but when you say it. 10 minutes passed. Then I picked up the phone again. Typed, of course. Dinner is at 6. I didn't ask what she wanted. I didn't ask why. I already knew. That evening, I set the table again. 3 plates. Not 6 this time. No extra chairs. No empty expectations. Just what was necessary. I cooked something simple. Pasta. Light sauce. Nothing heavy. This wasn't a night for comfort. At 6:02, I heard the door. Not a knock. The key. Daniel still had it. Of course he did. They walked in together this time. Closer than before. Claire smiled. Carefully. Daniel didn't. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. No hugs. No air kisses. Just distance. We sat down. The room felt smaller than it had before. Not physically, but in the way space tightens when something is about to be said. Claire didn't wait long. I wanted to clear something up, she said, placing her hands lightly on the table. There it was. Not an apology. Not an explanation. A correction. I nodded once. Go ahead. She glanced at Daniel. Just briefly. Then back at me. What I said the other night. I think it came out wrong. Of course it did. I didn't mean to confuse you, she continued. It's just we've been going through some things, and I spoke too quickly. Too quickly. That wasn't true. Claire never speaks too quickly. She speaks exactly when she means to. I didn't interrupt. I let her continue. We're still figuring things out, she said. Nothing is final yet. Nothing is final. Another careful phrase. I glanced at Daniel. He was looking at his plate. Not eating. Just there. I turned back to her. What exactly are you figuring out? I asked. Clear. Direct. No emotion. She held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then smiled again. Softer this time. We're thinking about starting a family, she said. Thinking. Starting. Different words. Different meaning. Very different from what she said before. I see, I replied. Silence settled over the table. I picked up my fork. Took a bite. Let the moment stretch. Because this wasn't about catching her. It was about letting her show the difference. Between then and now. She spoke again. I just didn't want there to be any misunderstanding. No. She didn't want there to be any uncontrolled understanding. I nodded slightly. I appreciate that, I said. And I did. Because now, she had confirmed it herself. The whisper wasn't truth. It was positioning. Daniel finally spoke. We just want everything to be clear, he said. Clear. That word again. But nothing about this was clear. Not to them. To me. It was becoming very clear. I set my fork down. Looked at both of them. Calm. Steady. I understand, I said. And I did. More than they realized. Dinner continued after that. Small talk. Safe topics. Just like before. But this time, I wasn't listening for what they said. I was listening for what they changed. And they had changed everything. The story. The timing. The meaning. That's how you know. When something is being adjusted. It was never stable to begin with. After they left, I didn't clean up right away. I sat at the table, alone, and replayed both versions. The whisper and the correction, side by side. They didn't match. Not even close. I reached for the notebook, opened it, and wrote, statement revised, meaning altered. Then, below it, original intent confirmed. I closed the notebook, because now there was no question left. She wasn't sharing news. She was creating a narrative. And tonight, she had just changed it, which means there's something underneath it. She still doesn't want me to see. That night, I didn't sleep right away. Not because I was upset, not because I was confused, but because everything had finally aligned. I lay in bed, the room dim except for the small lamp beside me. The same lamp I had turned on every night for years. The same soft light, the same quiet, but not the same thoughts. I replayed it again. Not the dinner, not the words, the shift, the whisper. I'm pregnant with your sons, and then we're thinking about starting a family. Two completely different things, and yet delivered by the same person, in the same calm tone, with the same steady eyes. That's not confusion. That's control. I turned onto my side, looked at the empty space beside me. There was a time when I would have talked this through, out loud, piece by piece. Now, I didn't need to, because when something becomes clear enough, you stop asking questions. You start making decisions. The next morning, I didn't follow my usual routine. No coffee first, no toast. Instead, I went straight to the dining table, sat down, opened the notebook. I didn't flip through old pages, didn't revisit anything. I turned to a blank page and wrote one word, why? Then I sat back, because everything I had collected so far, the whisper, the document, the change in story, the timing, it all pointed to one thing. Not what happened, but why it was happening. I tapped the pen lightly against the table. Once, twice. There are only a few reasons someone creates a false narrative. To protect something, to hide something, or to move something. I looked around the house. Slowly. The walls, the furniture, the framed photos, everything I had built, everything that had stayed in place for years. Then I thought about the documents, the ones in the box, authorization, access, joint oversight, careful words, words that don't take anything immediately, but change who controls it. I didn't move, didn't react. I just let that connection form. Because now, the question wasn't about a pregnancy. It was about positioning. I stood up slowly, walked to the hallway, opened the closet. The box was still there, exactly where I left it. I brought it back to the table, opened it. This time, I didn't skim. I reviewed, page by page, line by line, looking for one thing. Pattern, dates, names, changes. And there it was. Subtle, but consistent. Each document added something. A little more access, a little more involvement. And always, her name. Never removed. Always included. I closed the folder, because I didn't need more than that. The structure was clear now, and the whisper wasn't random. It was pressure, a way to introduce something emotional into something structured. Because when emotions enter a situation, people stop looking at details. They react. They accept things faster. They don't question timing, or wording, or intent. I sat back down, hands resting on the table, and for the first time, I said it out loud. This isn't about a child. The room didn't answer. It didn't need to, because I already knew. It was about control. And the pregnancy, whether real, unclear, or adjusted, was just a tool. I picked up the notebook again, wrote, emotional leverage introduced. Then beneath it, linked to financial structure. I paused, looked at the page, then added one more line. Next step, escalation. I closed the notebook, because that's what happens next. When the first move doesn't get the reaction they expect, they escalate. Clearer, closer, more direct. And this time, they wouldn't whisper. I stood up, walked to the window. The street looked the same, quiet, unchanged. But I knew better now, because nothing had changed on the outside. Everything had changed underneath. And whatever they thought they were building, they were about to push it further. Which meant, so was I. The escalation came exactly the way I expected. Not loud, not aggressive, but structured. 2 days later, Daniel called again. This time, there was no hesitation in his voice. Mom, can we meet tomorrow? He asked. Not come by. Not stop in. Meet. That word matters. Of course, I said. We were thinking, maybe we could sit down somewhere. Go over a few things, he added. Go over. That confirmed it. All right, I replied. What time? 10 a.m. I'll pick you up. I didn't argue. Didn't ask where. Because I already knew what this was. That night, I prepared. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Practically. I took the folder out again. Placed it on the table. Opened it. Inside, documents. Copies. Notes. I didn't add anything new. Didn't rearrange anything. I just made sure everything was clear. Because clarity matters more than reaction. Then I closed it. Set it aside. And went to bed. The next morning, I dressed simply. Nothing formal. Nothing careless. Neutral. At 9:58, Daniel pulled into the driveway. Right on time. I stepped outside. Locked the door behind me. He got out of the car. Gave me a small nod. No hug. Morning, he said. Morning, I replied. The drive was quiet. Not uncomfortable. Just intentional. He didn't turn on the radio. Didn't fill the silence. Neither did I. 10 minutes later, we pulled into a small office building. Not a restaurant. Not a cafe. An office. That told me everything. We walked inside together. The receptionist greeted him by name. Not me. That also told me something. We were expected. Claire was already there. Sitting. Composed. A folder in front of her. Of course. Hi, she said. Hello, I replied. No extra warmth. No tension. Just acknowledgement. We sat down across from her. There was another person in the room. A man. Mid-50s. Suit. Professional. He introduced himself. Just here to help facilitate, he said. Of course he was. Claire spoke first. I thought it would be best if we all sat down and made sure everything was clear moving forward. Clear. That word again. I nodded once. All right, I said. She opened her folder. Inside, documents. New ones. She slid one across the table toward me. Just something we've been working on, she said. I looked at it. Didn't touch it yet. Then I looked up at her. Before we start, I said calmly, I'd like to understand something. She paused. Of course. I held her gaze. At dinner, I said, you told me you were pregnant. Silence. Daniel shifted slightly in his seat. The man didn't speak. Claire smiled. Soft. Controlled. I said we were thinking about starting a family, she corrected. No, you didn't. But I didn't say that. I let the difference sit there. Because everyone in that room heard it. Even if they didn't acknowledge it. I reached into my bag. Took out the envelope. The document. Placed it gently on the table. Between us. I received this, I said. No accusation. No explanation. Just a fact. Claire's eyes flickered. Just for a second. Then she leaned forward slightly. Where did you get that? She asked. Not what is that? Not let me see. Where did you get that? That told me everything. I believe that's not the important question, I said. The room shifted. Subtle, but clear. The man glanced at Claire. Then at Daniel. No one interrupted. I continued. The dates don't align, I said. Calm. Precise. And what you said and what this shows are not the same. Silence. Claire leaned back. Her posture changed. Not dramatic. But enough. The confidence softened. Just slightly. Daniel looked at her. Waiting. For the first time. Not following. Waiting. Claire took a breath. Then smiled again. But this time, it wasn't as steady. There may have been some confusion, she said. Of course. I nodded. I agree, I replied. Then I finally looked down at the document she had given me. I picked it up. Read the first line. Then the second. Then I set it back down. Without signing. Without reacting. I don't sign documents I don't fully understand, I said. The man spoke then. We can walk through it together, he offered. I looked at him. I'm sure you can, I said. Then back to Claire. But not today. Silence. Clear. Final. I stood up. Slowly. No rush. No tension. I think we all need more clarity before moving forward, I added. Then I picked up my folder, closed my bag, and walked toward the door. Behind me, no one stopped me. No one argued. Because they didn't expect that. They expected confusion, emotion, reaction. They didn't expect control. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter. Just clean. I walked to the car. Didn't look back. Because I didn't need to. The meeting wasn't about signing anything. It was about revealing something. And now, everything was on the table. Just not the way they planned. The drive home was quiet. Not tense. Not awkward. Just quiet. Daniel didn't say anything at first. He kept his hands on the wheel, eyes forward, like if he stayed focused enough, The conversation we just had wouldn't follow us. I didn't speak either, because there was nothing left to ask. About halfway home, he finally exhaled. Long tired. Mom, he started. I didn't turn to look at him. That didn't have to go like that. I nodded slightly. You're right, I said. It didn't. Silence again. Then, softer. She was just trying to make things easier. Easier. That word almost made me smile. For who? I asked. He didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. We both knew. The car slowed as we turned into my street. Familiar houses. Familiar quiet. Nothing looked different. But I knew. Everything was. He pulled into the driveway. Put the car in park. But didn't turn it off. I just don't want this to become a problem, he said. I finally looked at him. Really looked. He looked older than he had a week ago. Not physically, but in the way people do when they're trying to hold two things together that don't fit. It already is, I said calmly. Not sharp. Not emotional. Just true. He swallowed. Looked away. That's not what I meant. I know, I said. And I did. Because Daniel had always been like that. He didn't confront. He adjusted. He found ways to smooth things over. To make discomfort disappear without actually resolving it. That used to be enough. It wasn't anymore. I'm not asking you to choose anything, I continued. His head turned slightly. But I am asking you to see what's happening. He didn't respond. Because seeing something clearly means you have to do something about it. And he wasn't ready for that. I'll talk to her, he said finally. I nodded. That would be a good start. He turned off the engine. Neither of us moved right away. Then he looked at me again. You're overthinking this, he said. There it was. The one thing people say when they don't want to look deeper. I didn't argue. I don't think so, I replied. And that was enough. I opened the door. Stepped out. Closed it gently behind me. Mom, he called. I paused. Turned slightly. We're trying to do the right thing, he said. I looked at him. I believe you, I said. And I did. That was the hardest part. Because intentions don't always match actions. And sometimes, people do the wrong thing while believing it's right. I walked up to the front door, unlocked it, stepped inside. The house greeted me the same way it always had. Quiet. Still. Unchanged. But I didn't go to the kitchen. Didn't take off my shoes right away. I stood there, in the entryway, for a moment, letting everything settle. The meeting, the document, the look on Claire's face, the shift in Daniel's voice. It all lined up now. Not perfectly, but clearly enough. I walked into the living room, sat down in my chair by the window. The sunlight had moved, now casting longer shadows across the floor. Time passes whether you act or not. That's something people forget. I didn't pick up the notebook. Didn't open the folder. I didn't need to. Because this part wasn't about gathering information anymore. It was about consequences. Claire had made her move. Daniel had supported it, whether he realized it or not. And now, they had both seen something they didn't expect. Resistance. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just firm. I leaned back in the chair. Closed my eyes for a second. There's a point in every situation like this where things stop being hidden. Not because someone confesses, but because the structure breaks. Small cracks. At first, a hesitation, a contradiction, a reaction that doesn't match the plan. And once that happens, it doesn't go back. I opened my eyes, looked around the room. Everything I had built was still here. Nothing had been taken. Not yet. And that mattered. Because now, I wasn't reacting to what they were doing. I was ahead of it. I stood up slowly, walked to the hallway. The box was still on the top shelf. I didn't take it down. Not yet. Because I didn't need to move. Not until they did. And they would. Because plans like theirs don't stop halfway. They adjust. They regroup. They come back, stronger, more direct. And next time, it wouldn't be a conversation. It would be a decision. I turned off the light in the hallway. Let the house settle into evening. Because whatever came next wouldn't be quiet anymore. The next move didn't come the way I expected. It didn't come louder. It didn't come stronger. It came quieter. 3 days passed. No calls. No messages. But on the fourth morning, there was a knock at the door. Not the doorbell. A knock. I was already awake. Already dressed. Already at the table. I didn't rush. I never rush anymore. I walked to the door. Opened it. Daniel stood there. Alone. No Claire. That told me everything. Hi, Mom, he said. Come in, I replied. He stepped inside. Looked around. The same way people do when they're trying to place themselves back into something they've stepped away from. Nothing had changed. And that unsettled him more than anything. We didn't sit in the dining room. He chose the living room. Sat on the edge of the chair. Not fully relaxed. Not fully present. I sat across from him. No coffee. No distractions. Just space. He didn't speak right away. I let him take his time. Because this wasn't my moment to start. It was his. Finally, I talked to her, he said. I nodded. And he exhaled. She didn't think it would go this far. Of course she didn't. They just wanted to organize things, he continued. Organize. That word again. Make sure everything was secure. For the future. I watched him. Still trying to hold the structure together. Still trying to make it sound reasonable. And the pregnancy? I asked. He looked down. That wasn't, he paused. Then corrected himself. That wasn't what it sounded like. I didn't respond. Because I already knew. She thought it might make things easier to explain later, he added. Easier. That word again. I leaned back slightly. So she created something emotional, I said quietly. To move something practical. He didn't argue. Because he couldn't. That was the first honest moment. Silence filled the room. Not heavy. Just real. I didn't see it at first, he admitted. I nodded. I know. Because I did. That's how this works. It doesn't look like a plan when you're inside it. It looks like help. Like progress. Like doing the right thing. Until someone steps back. And sees the structure. I should have told you, he said. Yes, I replied. No anger. No blame. Just truth. He looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time in all of this, he wasn't avoiding anything. I didn't think she would, he stopped. Then shook his head slightly. I didn't think it would involve you like that. I held his gaze. It always does, I said. Because family decisions never stay contained. They spread. Through silence. Through assumptions. Through things left unsaid. He nodded slowly. I ended it, he said. That was the moment. The real one. Not the meeting. Not the documents. This. What do you mean? I asked. The changes, he said. The documents. The structure. I told her we're not doing that anymore. I studied his face. Not for emotion. For clarity. And it was there. Not perfect. Not complete. But real. And her. I asked. He hesitated. She didn't take it well. Of course she didn't. Plans rarely end quietly. But that wasn't my concern. Not anymore. I nodded once. All right. That was all. No lecture. No long speech. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about seeing. Clearly. He sat there for a moment longer. Then stood up. Are we okay? He asked. I looked at him. The same boy from that photograph. Just older. More complicated. Yes, I said. And I meant it. Because, okay, doesn't mean nothing happened. It means something did. And we didn't ignore it. He nodded. Then moved toward the door. Paused. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't hear him. But because I wanted him to understand something. I know, I said. And that was enough. He left. The door closed softly behind him. And just like that, the house returned to silence. But not the same silence as before. This one was settled. Complete. I walked back to the dining table. Ran my hand lightly across the surface. The same place where it started. That whisper. I'm pregnant. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I finally understood it. It was never about the words. It was about what they were trying to move. And now, nothing had moved. I turned off the light. Let the room dim into evening. And for the first time since that dinner, there was nothing left to figure out. Nothing left to watch. Nothing left to wait for. Because the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be seen. And once you see it, everything else falls into place.